Hi, welcome to Inner Edison Podcast. I want to thank you for being here. And if it's even your first time or you've been here many times, I want you to remember a couple different things. One, if you enjoy like we do here, please like and subscribe. The other thing is your greatest accomplishments come from your greatest defeats. And I don't want you to forget that. And it's okay to have mistakes and learn from them. It's when you don't learn from them that we have issues. And today's guest is no different than you are. So let's get to know Edgar Sierra and get to know his story. How you doing, Edgar?
Hey Ed, how's it going, man? Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, my pleasure. A lot of people don't know, but we were talking before we started, and I'm in the mortgage industry, which a lot of people who are listening to this know this. And you were talking about how hard it's been to get a house in Reno, and what you had to do to be able to get one as an entrepreneur because you were in your early stages. And I was saying we should kind of talk about that for a minute or two. It won't be the only thing we talk about, but I want entrepreneurs to understand that when you go on this journey, you're sacrificing something to get something.
Yes.
And sometimes that is showing income in order to buy a house, in order to do certain things. But that's okay. There are programs out there, or there's ways around it where you still do your business, but you do something else to supplement that income. Yeah. And from what we were talking about, that's kind of what you had to do.
Yeah.
Was it a shocker to you that you had to do something like that, or did you know already?
You know what? When I first started the business, I did not understand that this would happen, right? I didn't know anything about buying a house. And I guess when I started the business, nobody ever said, hey, man, if you're going to buy a house in the future, make sure you show profit. Right. Because as I was starting business owner, I started writing everything off. I was like, yo, I don't got to pay taxes. That's great. Because I was in the negatives. Year one, I was, I think, almost $7,000 into it. Following year was only maybe $600, $700. And then we made a profit the following year. And that was in 2019. And as everybody knows, 2020, right? Everybody took a hit. What was kind of the problem is that in 2019, we tried to go through this process, but we were kind of in the same boat where they're like, hey, you wrote everything off based on paper, you made nothing. I'm like, man. So we started kind of working on it, and my plan kind of got derailed, of course, as everybody else's in 2020, when I was like, yo, I need to make a profit this year. I'm going to make sure I don't write anything off, etc. But 2020 happened, and that was it. Kind of one of the things that happened, and side by side to this and parallels to this, was that in 2020, I graduated with my bachelor's, and immediately I was like, what am I going to do to be ready, when I want to buy a house down the road? And I looked at everything that was happening in the world, and I went into cybersecurity. I started my master's in cybersecurity, quickly went on to get my certification in CompTIA Sec Plus. And then I was like, yo, I could do something with this. I need to find a job, right? I need to find the job where I need a W-2. So I did that. I knew I was going to have to make some sacrifices because obviously 2020 was going to hurt, and I didn't know what 2021 was going to do to my taxes, right? So I said, let's figure this out. I got my Security Plus. It took me a couple months, probably 2 months to find a job, but I found a job as a security analyst, and that supplemented everything. So come October, we ran all the numbers, and I talked to mortgage advisor, sat down with the mortgage advisor, and they're like, hey, you need to pay some stuff off, but we can't even look at your new job because you haven't been in 6 months. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I just got this.
Yeah, but you had been working prior to that for 2 years, right?
No, the business was the only thing I was doing.
Right, that's okay, but yeah. So did you go to the bank? Please don't take this wrong.
No, did not.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because typically the only time you have to be there for 6 months is if you had a gap in your employment.
Yeah.
Like if you were on, say you were on unemployment during the pandemic, right? Was that what the case was?
No. So I was still running the business. What the 6 months was, I think it had to do with the taxes, right? Because obviously we took a loss in that 2020.
No, because you can just show, did you show that you weren't running that business anymore?
No, because the business was still running. We were still open through it. It was just like bare minimum. Like we were making just enough to keep the doors open, right?
Right.
So I'm not sure, but that was kind of the speculation. They're like, hey, you need to be here at least 6 months. And I said, okay, let me work on it. Of course, there was a couple other things like in my credit score that they're like, hey, you need to take care of this. So in a sense, I was okay with it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to spend the next couple months working hard. I'll do overtime there. You know, the business is starting to pick up. Like, we're good. So it was actually only 3.5 weeks ago that I said, hey, based on what I'm seeing, my credit should be good now. Like, I've cleared off everything you told me to. And sure enough, it was. And they're like, hey, you got pre-approved. And I'm like, yo, let's do this. I'm excited now, right? But soon the excitement turned into like headaches and stress and everything in half. On top of getting this house this year, I'm also getting married this year. Right?
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Typically people don't do both. And now I understand why. Especially in this market. People had told me from the beginning, hey man, this market's going to be tough. Be ready for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, it's not going to be a big deal. Well, the problem was that I started falling in love with the first house I went to immediately, right? So that became an issue. It was an emotional roller coaster too with my fiance. It's like, hey, do we buy this house? And we're like, yeah, let's put an offer. Decline. People are coming in $10,000 over appraisal, and it's just, you kind of get defeated. You're like, man, so what can I do? I don't have $10,000 because I'm getting ready to get married too, right? How do we go about this? But slowly we quickly found the things we wanted, the things that, made sense to us. And the more we looked at houses, we're like, you know what? I'm happy we didn't take that first one. I'm happy that our offers got declined initially because that was it. But yeah, and so it came to this, but this year, the other on top of all of this was we made a profit last year. So I had to pay taxes, which most people don't like to do, but you have to kind of balance this out. Like, in order to show that you're making money, you have to show profit, which then turns into having to pay taxes on your business.
Right.
And that was
to offset the losses you took.
Exactly.
So you wanted to make enough profit to offset the losses, because if you're making money with the other thing full time and then your company just makes enough to cover your losses from the other, so it ends up zero, then you're perfect. But some people, it's just I know people don't want to pay taxes. I get it. But if you do that, it makes it so much harder to do many different things. And we were talking about this guy I'm taking care of now, who, he made millions, but because of the way they do his taxes, because he's in multifamily and building and all this other stuff, they can write off stuff and it shows like he made nothing. And you look at it, you go, you're poor. And he's not. He's got the cash. You can look at his accounts. I had the underwriter's like, if he makes $3 million a month, why does he need this loan? Because he wants this cash for his business. He doesn't use it. He's building properties. There's no properties out there. Yeah. So the more he builds, the more he puts people in it, and the more money don't worry about it, So
yeah, and it was a big shocker to me. Nobody really teaches you this.
Nope.
And I slowly found out actually last year when I got, I think the biggest credit card for the business. I've never held credit cards. I bootstrapped my business. I never believed in owing, but we got to a point where, like, in 2020, I was only making enough to clear it, to make it through, right? Pay my employees, keep the doors open, pay the bills. And when I got my first credit card, or the biggest credit card, was they were like, hey, you're not making anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, and that's what really opened up my eyes that if I don't do this at some point, if I don't pay taxes at some point, I'm going to continue having this uphill battle, no matter where I go, whether it's a bank, housing, and slowly I learned a lot of lessons, and I've continued learning lessons through this entire process. It definitely has not been easy, and nobody ever taught it to me. Nobody has ever talked about it, and that to me was kind of that's detrimental, because I would have learned this way before going into this role. It would have been nice to know this years before my business, before I opened my business.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's learning the things along the way so you understand it. And nobody, like you said, nobody teaches us. And by the way, I'm writing a book, How to Build Personal Wealth Through Homeownership. Basically, it's the financial freedom for buying your first house. I'm in the process right now, just because of this, right? I've been doing this for 20 some years. No one told me how to do it. I learned from being in the business and certain things. I tell all my employees, you got to own a house. And they look at me like they're crazy, or I'm crazy. And I said, how can you help somebody through the process or understand what they're going through unless you've been through it?
Exactly.
Right? You have to have been through it yourself. because you don't realize the emotional part where you don't get the house. And then you find out you finally get in contract with the one, and then you move, and that's the one you were supposed to have to begin with. And you have to understand that it's just like getting married and finding that person. You kiss a lot, women say you kiss a lot of frogs to get the prince. Well, that's the same thing with the housing. You have to go through. If you don't get it, that's okay, because that's not the one for you. The one you get is the right one, and you'll see exactly what I mean once you get in there and it's your house and everything. Yeah, but people don't understand that.
No, and I didn't. I honestly had to check my emotions in those last 3.5 weeks. I had to check my emotions every day we went to a house. It was tough because you go through all these years. For me, it was since 2017 when I opened the business. Sweat and tears. Nights that turned into days that turned into nights. Tons of energy drinks and coffee along the road to get to this point, and then you're just like, what, am I not going to be able to afford anything? And you kind of get defeated, right? You've built so much and you're just like, man, everybody's coming in here outbidding me and they're doing 10,000 over appraisal. That's not even over asking. That's over the appraisal, right? And this, and to explain it to other people is if the bank goes to approve it, appraisal it at 150, you're going to pay 160, but that 10 grand has to come out of pocket.
Right.
And I don't have that money sitting around. Obviously, like I said, I have a wedding, so we're paying that off too. And weddings are not cheap, nowadays. So it was kind of that balance. It's like, how do we?
Dude, you're in Reno.
Yeah,
you can get that real cheap there.
Yeah, and
the reason I'm joking is because I told my kids, I'm not paying for your wedding, but if you want to buy a house, I'll help you buy a house.
Yeah,
right. That's what I'll do, because I don't want to pay for one day. Because it's just so expensive, where you can put that money into something else and buy a house, do certain things. And the reason we're talking about this is because this is all about learning what happens when you own a business and what you can and can't do. One of the things you want to do is, I'm not saying pay a lot in taxes, but you have to look at, what do you want to do down the road? Yeah. What do you want to, cars, you name it. You need to show some income in order to get them. That with houses, right? So if you were making enough money, you can do a bank statement loan, which means that we look at your deposits, we average them over 24 months for your business accounts, and then that is your income per month, right? And so I had a guy who was only showed 60 grand on his tax returns. When I did that, he was making 220,000 a month.
Wow. I
had another guy, the one I was telling about earlier, he ended up being, when I averaged his for 24 months, it was $5 million for 12 months and $3 million for 10 months per month. So there's ways to do it, but you have to have the deposits and certain things, which a lot of companies don't, right? Because depending on how big your business is. So the fact that you went to work for somebody so you get your home, and I tell a lot of people, I understand you love your business and you want to keep doing it. The question is, when do you want to own that house? When do you want to do certain things? Because if you want to do it the regular way, you might want to do this real quick. Don't start your business until after you get your house, and then get your house and then go start your business, because then it's done. And I always tell people right now, don't worry about rates, because we're going to be refinancing everybody in a year and a half to 2 years anyway when we hit this recession.
Yep. No, and I agree with you. One of the big things that I've also learned along that, in the direction that you're talking about, is pay your debt before you start a business, because that's one thing I didn't do. And starting your business like that is not the way to go. I mean, I had to bootstrap it. My fiance, at the time, she paid my bills for 3 months in order for me to start my business and quit my job. I used to work for the federal government. So, man, I was making good money. I had the best health insurance, right? To go from that to zero. Yeah.
And that's another thing. So what business, and I don't know the name of your company.
Yeah. So it's E.Sierra Media.
All right. So you do media? Is that what you do? All types of media?
All types. Yep.
So you do social media, you do regular media. I mean, what do you do?
Everything from social media. We do content creation, from video, photos, graphic design, web design. We are able to provide commercial space for our clients now. So, they need commercials on TV or even streaming services. We can do that.
Oh, okay. And so that takes time to build, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And also for people to understand who you are, and what you're doing for other companies, you have to do for yourself first.
Exactly.
Right. You have to show that you have your own, this is our commercial, this is our media, this is who we are. You have to do that ahead of time. And that takes money, that takes time, that takes energy, that takes a lot of stuff. And I want everybody, if you want to start a business, great, but just understand the process of going through it, and you're not going to understand everything, because that's why the show is called Inner Edison. You're going to make mistakes. But what you need to do is reach out to people in your industry or outside your industry, find a coach, find somebody who can help you, who've been through it, to help you walk down that walk and get you through that. So you understand it, because if you would have had somebody who knew how to set up a company or how to do this, they can say, hey, this is how you get this insurance for workers' comp. Workers what? Right? It's like, there's all these things you have no idea because no one tells us.
Yep.
Right. Did your parents own did your family have a house? Did they own a house?
No.
Before? So you're first in your family to own a home?
Yep. First gen in my family of everything. High school graduate, college graduate, homeowner, soon business owner.
So you're setting new records for everybody.
Yeah.
A new standard for everybody. And that's the thing is now, but what you can do for your family, your children that you're going to have, explain to them what they need to know going up. Because my dad died when I was 12, hairy cell leukemia from Agent Orange through being in Vietnam. I didn't have that mentor to understand businesses, right? My grandfather owned a dairy, but that's not the same thing, right? That's hard freaking work.
Yeah.
That's not like it is a business, but technically it's really not. You're doing all this work. So I didn't understand the whole process either. And I worked for some people and started my own companies, multiple of them. And you have to go through that process and learn. And because there is no shortcuts. And it's school, the whole saying, I went to the school of hard knocks. That's okay. Mm-hmm. That's like the best way to learn. And that, and I don't want to keep talking because this is about you and what you're doing. But it's you just have to be okay with that. And I'm glad you came on. A lot of people are going, why are you talking to a 26-year-old about business? Because it doesn't matter how old you are. Look at Dan Fleshman. I mean, when he was 19, he sold his, he went public on his company and made millions. It doesn't matter how old you are and what you do. People start things early and old. It doesn't matter. We all can learn from each other.
100%.
All right. So I guess I got to ask you a question. Did you? All right. So no, what I mean by that is because we went through the house thing. Basically, we just want to let you know when you're starting a company, understand that certain things you're not going to be able to do. So if you want to do them, you might want to do them before. And, a lot of time people talk about side hustles. That's what you do from 5 to 9. Well, some people don't want to do the 8 to 5. They want to do the 5 to 9 fully, and that's fine. But it takes time to get there, and you have to have support, like you did with your fiance, to help you. You have to have that. Otherwise, you can't get things started.
No, and let's talk about that. One of the things in my journey was kind of is that there was happy accidents, right? Realistically, when I kind of went into the workforce, I got out of high school and was in college. I was working for a federal agency, and I loved what I did, but I was in love with the idea of it, not so much in love with it. And photography started for me when I was 16 with a professor that just needed help around the studio. And I was just shooting just for fun. And I met this random lady in the desert, and she goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just shooting." Well, we were doing this type of photography called light painting, and she thought we were LARPing, which is the weirdest thing ever, right? At like 10 o'clock at night, midnight. But she was super nice. She was like, "Hey, I run 3 magazines. Would you like to come and shoot for me?" I was like, I was an amateur. At the time, it was just a hobby. And what happened was that a week later, we sat down, had some coffee, and immediately I had a shoot with Jaguar and Land Rover the following week. And what kind of occurred from there was that I went to go do the shoot. I never did anything professional. This was my first shoot, but I went in there confidently. I did the photos, and little did I know that Jaguar and Land Rover fell in love with them. And next thing I know, they're purchasing 3 images, each at $500 a piece for their commercial stuff. And I'm just like, I've never made this much money. At the time, I was shooting family portraits for like $50, right? So $500 for each image was just like astounding. But one thing that I quickly learned was like, look, I need to be careful with this, because if they file this or I get a 1099 from them, obviously I need to report that. So what I quickly did is I then invested that money into an LLC, in the state of Nevada, and I got my EIN and my LLC, and I was like, yo, this is good. This is where it needs to go.
Right. Hold on. For people who haven't done this, EIN is your tax ID number from the IRS, people. Just so you know.
So EIN is like your social security number for your business.
Correct.
But yeah, so it created that, and I really had no idea what to do next. I'm going to be honest with you. It just did not know what to do next. She hired me as her head photographer, and I was just shooting. I didn't understand what I was doing at that moment in time, but slowly it started making sense because my photography was on the front page. People were seeing this in some affluent neighborhoods here in Reno, right? You're talking about people that are making $500,000 to $1 million a year. Then I started getting calls for commercial work to just shoot this. Hey, we want you to shoot this. We need content for this. And the business kind of slowly just started working its way up. One thing is that I didn't have anybody to guide me. I spent just a lot of time being smart about the money. It was like, okay, how do I purchase this? How long is it going to last me, right? Is it worth paying $500 more for this piece of equipment rather than going the cheap route? And there was a lot of that. And as you know, that relationship with that person fell apart. And I was super scared. I'm like, yo, I'm going to lose all my business. But that didn't happen. What actually happened is I joined another organization that I started shooting for free. And I know some people are going to be like, well, why are you shooting for free, right? Realistically, because I saw the value of long-term. When we looked at, for example, there was a gala that they were doing that it was just like, hey, here's our budget. It's like $500. But I went to go research who was going to be there and what hands could I shake, who could I give my card to, and who's going to be the next person that's going to bring me business. And I was happy I ever made that decision because now I sit on the board of directors for that organization 3 years later, Like I sit on the board of that organization. They approached me. They're like, hey, Edgar, we'd really like to have you on the board. You've done so much for us. I never thought I'd get to this point. I never thought I'd be here. I went from exchanging my services for a meal to now being on the board of the directors and creating some great content for them and creating some stuff. There was all these happy accidents that led to this. During the pandemic, I thought I was going to have to close my doors. We had people that needed content creation. They needed a web design to be to be able to order online. Well, then they needed something to announce it. And at that time, it happened. We had enough clients to survive it. And, now I'm 2 employees in and an office that went from 400 square feet to almost 900 square feet. Now we have a studio space. Oh man, it was just a lot of little things that generated the business that we have today.
No, and I get it because for me, our industry went crazy, and I do radio, also talk radio. And so I had to set up a studio in my home first, and then I moved it to the office. And then I sent everybody home after the third Omicron thing came. I'm like, everybody go work from home. I'm tired of this. I don't want to worry about wearing a mask or any of this kind of stuff. And so now I have 2 studios in here, one for me that I'm in now, which that's real behind me. And then I have another one, which was the conference room I turned into so that you have 4 people come in for the radio show and green screens and all that stuff. So when I'm in there, it's fake, but in here it's real. But what I'm getting at is that whole thing changed everything for everyone. And usually for the better. Yes, we lost some people. And it's sad, and I don't want to put that down. But I'm just saying but it helped us grow our businesses in different areas that we didn't think about. And that's the whole thing about you have to understand change is going to happen. You have to adapt. You have to change and grow. And these days it's worse. When I was, if you go back in the 40s and 50s, change happened like in 20 years. Right. Things changed. It wasn't like now today, things change so fast. It's 6 months. It's less than a year. Things are totally changing everything you're talking about. Yep. Right. So, you have TikTok today. You might have something totally different tomorrow and something else you have to deal with and it's constant. One thing about my industry, if you don't like it today, wait till tomorrow, it'll just be worse. So, it's just the way it is. Someone was asking me yesterday, I was on this podcast called A Comeback Kid, and they wanted to talk about, things of issues and how you come back from it. And it's like my industry, if you look back my last 23 years I've been in it, there's probably a good 12 years. I mean, really good 12 years. The rest of it was really ugly for, so long, just because we had time, during the downturn from 2006 to 2010, during that period of time, a lot of people, you still bought homes, but it was really tough. People are paying cash for it. And it's like today, people are still paying cash for homes, which I don't know how they're doing it. So anyway, but what I'm getting is just understand in life, in your company, whatever you do, change is going to happen, and you have to adapt and move on. And what else are you seeing for the future for what you guys are doing? Are you guys doing any podcasts, doing any editing, any of that kind of stuff yet?
So we have a podcast now, and it's called The Daily Entrepreneur, where we interview entrepreneurs from different industries to talk about their successes, failures, their upcomings, their background, whatever it may be. But we're slowly going to get away from that. And one of the big things that we're going to focus more is on video right now. And the podcast was a really great, starting point. I started it back in college when, I was also in the point where I didn't have money to pay for a coach. I didn't have money to do all that kind of stuff. So to give people a free resource on, entrepreneurship and being able to meet these people was really the goal of it. I reached its goal, and it's not that I'm no longer passionate about it, but we're going to go a different direction with it and focusing a little bit more on having that more personal aspect to it by doing videos, right? We're probably going to do some more YouTube stuff, things of that sort, to be able to give people the visual, because I think it's becoming harder now that people are not at home and, everybody's loosening up restrictions for them to listen. Like, our listening, our audience kind of dropped a little bit over the last couple of months as things started opening and things of that sort. So we kind of want to just do something a little bit different, spend a little bit more time on the video side. But yeah, the future of E.Sierra Media, it's not a tough one, but it's definitely one that I still don't know, because we're still in the process of essentially recovering for the last 2 years, right? We're kind of picking up business again. Things are starting to pick up, but I'm not saying I'm scared of the growth. I'm just being a little bit more reserved, just because of, now where the Ukraine situation and Russia, inflation, all of that's happening, kind of just trying to be a little bit reserved about it.
But can I say something to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't worry about all that. All that stuff's going to be there. And that's the thing, is you have to realize that no matter what's going on in the White House, what's going on over there, you still got to do business. You still have to you're going to have employees. People are still going to buy things. People still have to market it. They have to sell it. You have to get it. You just keep doing what you're doing, maybe change a few different things. Yeah. But for like us, I mean, yes, this is video and podcast, right? So this gets put up, and then it's also on the YouTube channel. I do a lot of lives, a lot on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook for my other stuff I do. Plus I do radio. It's just, you got to be in so many different avenues, different media stuff. And that's why what you're doing is needed even more now, because people want to do it, but they don't have time to do the editing or the time to set it up to do it. They don't understand. So the fact, I want to go back to your podcast, because what you did, you said you didn't have someone helping you. But when you were interviewing all those people, you got a lot of great ideas, right? Yeah. The one thing podcast does, it puts you in other people's sandbox, and also opens up doors to talk to people you would never be able to talk to before, or have to pay $1,000 an hour or $500, to talk to these people. And that's what the podcast allows you to do. I just say do it, but add the video part to it.
Yeah, I know. That's a great idea. We may have to find a way where it's both. And I think that's where right now is, like you talked about earlier, is adapting, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have to learn the best way to adapt it. So we'll see where it goes. I mean, the other next big thing for E.Sierra Media right now that I'm really excited for is we're rebranding, and you're the first to know. We haven't talked about it outside of the office, but we're going to rebrand the logo. We're going to rebrand everything, because as E.Sierra Media grows, our logo no longer justifies who we were, years ago when we put it together. E.Sierra Media is going to a new level, and I think we need to change that up. Back then, it was just photo videos. Now we're adding all this stuff, and I think our brand needs to encompass that. And so we're going on a big thing. We're doing something big. I don't want to spill the beans just yet, but we'll be doing something big here in the near future, to announce that. And that's going to be, something really, really fun.
That's great. I mean, because it's all about, you want to get who you are out there and know who it is. Your logo should stay as much possible as, for me, right? I took mine for my company and threw it to see if someone can make some changes, and nobody could, even though, but I have so many different ones for all my, the Inner Edison podcast, the Helping the Brave podcast, all the other stuff I do, Real Estate Jerky, all that kind of stuff, all different brands and different logos. And those things need to be protected also. And we can have a whole show on trademarks, but we're not there right now. But you need to protect your stuff, because someone can come along and steal it like you don't understand. Right?
Yeah.
You need to make sure you can protect it, and you can do it real easy through, some of those places. They don't pay for my show, so I'm not going to say their names. Right. You can find them. And I've actually had a couple attorneys on Inner Edison podcast talking about trademarks, talking about that thing and how to do it. You can go back there and get their information, and they'll take really good care of you. And that's awesome. The same for anybody. But Edgar, it's really nice to get to know you today. I kind of cheated by talking about my industry in the beginning, but I think people need to understand what happens when you become a business owner. And then you have to set it up to where you get to a point where you have to figure out, how much do I want to show for income? And then that's it. Because you can, under depreciation in your business, we can add that back in as income.
Right.
And people don't know that. So you depreciate everything you possibly can. That's fine. Go buy a brand new 6,000 pound vehicle and depreciate that fully the first year and offset your income. So if you have money that you're going to lose if you or pay taxes on it, you need to talk to your tax person and say, what do I do here? And sometimes it's just that, go get a new vehicle for the business,
Yeah. And also, going off of that, one of the big things that happened to me was, you have to find somebody that you're willing to trust, because it's also hard, finding somebody that's going to give you the right advice has always been hard. And, the funny story, my accountant actually did my taxes the first year for a burrito. And, he was going to school with me. He's a great guy. He went for accounting. He now works at the biggest firm in the U.S., Deloitte. But he was very honest with me from the beginning. And I don't think I'd be in the position if it wasn't for him, because I didn't understand, accounting. That's not my thing. I don't enjoy sitting behind a computer looking at numbers. That's not me. But one thing that I slowly found out, that I could talk to him about my business, talk to him about what I needed, and we could still have a beer, right? And if you're not able to do that with your accounting, you're not able to do that with your team, like, obviously you need to find somebody else, because there is a lot of people out there that give bad advice that are going to set you up for failure. No matter how hard, you're willing to do the right thing, if they set you up for failure at the beginning of your business, you're going to pay for it for the rest of your life.
Right. And there's actual fractional CFOs, fractional account. There's fractional everything you want to know, anything you want to do. I interviewed somebody the other day, and they were talking about, instead of doing the those agents you get overseas, what are they called? VAs, virtual assistants.
Oh yeah.
Or instead of doing that, they have fractional actual employees now in the United States that you can get, that'll work 5 hours on this or 5 hours on this. And so you don't have to hire an employee to do all your marketing, your this, where they're better off doing other things. So
and those are great alternatives to, instead of paying an accountant year round. If you can't afford it, if you're a small enough business. For us, we were small enough, first 2 years we were doing QuickBooks because we weren't doing enough. And obviously now that has changed. But, if you're starting small, you can go small.
Well, I still use QuickBooks and then just pass it off to the bookkeeper, and then they send it to the accountant. It's fine. It doesn't matter what you use, but, whatever works for you, just as long as you track it and don't get into trouble, because there's nothing worse than the IRS coming after you for something that there's no big deal, but because you didn't disclose it or this or that, they don't worry. Don't fight the IRS.
That's always been my worry. That stays in the back of my head every time I do taxes. Like, okay, how much of this, can I really say I know? Like, am I 100% right? And every year it just gets better, right? You start to understand the system a little bit more, and making sure, hey, every receipt, just save it. I mean, it's not going to do you any harm to just save it.
Just scan it and put it in a folder.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you don't have to worry about, where's your paper? No, but some guys I know that love to have those big files with all that paper in it. So when they roll it into the IRS people, it's like, here you go. This is all my documents.
Yeah.
Have fun. Anyway, enough of the joking around, but I really appreciate you being on. Anything else want to add before we go, Edgar?
No, I think we covered everything. And Ed, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And For all of your listeners, whoever wants to reach out, say hi, I need somebody to talk to, feel free to connect with us. E.SierraMedia.com is the website, and you guys can find my information there. Find a way to get a hold of me. E.Sierra Media across all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Any way you guys want to reach out, I'm here to talk. I'm here open, and it's free. I mean, I really enjoy talking to the next generation of entrepreneurs.
I appreciate you being here today, Edgar. And I want to thank you for being here and listening to our show. I really appreciate it. So everybody have a great day. You too, Edgar.
Thanks, Ed.